The following story is written to complement the challenge of the gods, the study of Adam as a type of Christ, from Genesis chapter 2. This story is a fantasy around the question, what would have happened if man had not sinned? It is written for the imagination. It is a love story. Eden revisited. The man awoke to an incredible sense of well-being. At that moment, though all that his eyes could see was the light blue expanse of the sky, he knew what shape his body was. He could feel the power of his new life flowing through each part, the lungs, the head, the arms and legs, his torso and chest. Wow, he was alive. His eyes at first had only seen the sky, but as he sat up, he began to take in his new surroundings, this place called Earth, his home, newly made for him, its new master. All this he knew without, apparently, having been told. He was on a pleasant hillside with mountains rising above him. In front of him lay a long sloping valley with a stream running down to the distant sea. The sides of the valley were covered with grasses, shrubs, and heathers of various shades and hues. Different kinds of animals came and went from his view, some moving slowly, grazing and feeding as they went, and others darting here and there, busying themselves with the affairs of their lives, each with its own mood, each with its own voice. The air, too, was full of life, and several kinds of birds had already caught his attention, though he was not a minute old. There was no other creature like himself in view, yet he knew he was not alone. He understood that, though he was not a minute old, he knew all he needed to know. Although he seemed to be alone, he knew he was actually in the presence of the one who had made him. His heart rose and joy flooded through his whole being simply at the thought of the one who had made him. He leapt to his feet and went laughing, dancing and singing to the top of the mountain. He shouted to the mountains to praise his Creator and theirs, to the hills to sing and the trees to clap their hands, to all the animals to come out and celebrate the life that had been given to them, to celebrate the one who had given them life. The man was not surprised at the tumult that followed his command, for the mountains and the hills and the trees and the animals all yielded forth their praise and joined him in a mighty chorus of wonder and love to their God for the life he had given them. This celebration lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, before the man, exhausted, lay down on the grass and slept. He was surrounded by hundreds and thousands of animals and birds, all equally exhausted, and the peace of the presence of God covered them as they slept. It was early the next day, and the sense of God's presence changed. The man woke up to hear God's voice say that they were going on a journey. God led them by way of a brook where the man washed and drank, and by way of a shrub-covered hillside where the man picked some berries and ate. As the man drank, he felt the water refresh the whole of his inner being, and as he ate, he could feel strength rising in his limbs. He knew that he had been created to be king of this place, and that all things were his to direct. God took the man to a garden that he had specially planted. It was filled with the most beautiful of trees and plants, the fruit from which would be his food. It was a place where the animals loved to be. God told him that this place was to be his home, and that from here he would care for and bless everything in the world. There was, however, one stipulation. At the center of the garden were two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The man was free to eat from any of the trees in the garden, including the tree of life. But he was not to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because if he did, he would die. The man enjoyed life in the garden, and when, one day, God said that he should give the different animals names, he was happy to do this. God brought each different kind of animal to Adam, and after he had thought for a while, he gave each its name, from the elephant, crocodile, and lion, right down to the tiny mouse. One of the things he noticed as he was naming the animals was that they all came to him in pairs. Each had its mate. Just as he was beginning to wonder about this, God unfolded another piece of his plan for Adam's life. God took Adam to the center of the garden and caused him to fall into a deep sleep. He took one of Adam's ribs from out of his side, closed up the wound, and using the rib, he made a companion for the man. When Adam woke up, he understood that this beautiful new creature was to be his companion, and he called her woman because she had come out of him. He was speechless with delight. He hugged and kissed her. He ran and leapt and danced with her, and then he took her to God and thanked him over and over again for so wonderful a companion. After that, Adam took her and showed her to the animals and birds. They were really excited, and the whole world had a party that lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The joy of being part of God's creation was so absolutely, almost unbearably good. For Adam and the woman, life was so beautiful, tending the garden and each day finding new delicious foods to eat, being surprised again and again at yet another new taste, more delightful than the others, if that were possible. To observe the animals and their different habits and get to know each one individually was even more thrilling than finding different fruits. The animals could obviously become friends in their own simple way, and each little personality filled the days with joy and laughter. They got to know God more intimately too as the days went by. Normally they would sense his approach, for the birds and animals would become quiet. Although the sun was on its way down, the shadow of his presence tinted the whole garden with a golden hue that spoke of a place and a glory still undreamt of by the man and his companion. The conversations between the man, the woman, and God were more pleasant than can be put into words. But picture what it must be like to stand in the breeze on the top of a mountain, or to be a baby in the womb, or an eagle higher than the clouds, or the nicest thing that you can imagine. well, these times, multiplied by 100, might begin to be a little like what it must have been like in the garden when God came to call. One day, the serpent, one of the most beautiful of the animals, asked the woman about the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. She answered that they were not to eat it, because God had said that if they did, they would surely die. The beautiful animal suggested that that would not happen, but that she and Adam would become as wise, as good, and as powerful as God himself. The woman and her husband had come to know and love God so much that they knew that the serpent was lying. So Adam told the animal to go, with all of his kind, to the far side of the sea, and never show its face again. As Adam spoke, the animal, as if lifted and flung by an unseen hand, rose into the air and careered across the sky. At the same time, as if from nowhere, a multitude of the same kind of creature rose and filled the sky, following their leader. The sky became dark with their bodies, and it was 3 hours before the sun could be seen again. When they saw God later that day, they told him of the creature's visit. God said that he knew what had happened, and that he was so pleased that they had not taken any notice of it. God took Adam and the woman to the center of the garden, and gave them each a piece of the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In their minds they saw all that would have happened to them and their descendants if they had disobeyed God and eaten of the forbidden fruit. They were so glad that they had not eaten of that fruit. Adam understood that the earth would be filled with multitudes of people who would all come out of the woman's body. So he called her Eve, which means mother of all the living. The next day, as Adam passed the tree, he noticed that it had begun to wither, and the day after, there was not even the stump of it left. As Adam and Eve continued to enjoy their world, they realized that everything had something to say about God. As they looked at the sun, moon, and stars, they thought about how great, powerful, and orderly God was. But then, as they looked at something small, they saw how careful God was to do even small things beautifully. The care of the animals for their young spoke of God's care of them. And as they watched their playfulness, a joy stirred within them, which they knew came right from the heart of God. When Adam looked at Eve, he was sure that God must be very much like her. And that is what Eve thought of Adam. The more they got to know each other, the more they felt that they were getting to know God. Whereas in the past they had sensed God coming to visit them at different times, now, as they enjoyed each other, it was as if God was there all the time. As they enjoyed living in this world that God had made for them, joy would fill them, overflowing and exploding from their lives with mighty shouts and songs of praise, and with leaping and dancing. All the rest of the world would join in with them. Sometimes even the sun, moon, and stars would seem to do mighty cartwheels across the sky. It was after such a time of praising God, when all the rest of creation was in an exhausted sleep, that Adam and Eve felt God drawing them to the tree of life in the center of the garden.